Yeah. Woo. Look at that. Right there. Nice one. First one on the Ben Parker mag spoon. Man, got it deep in the mouth there. Okay guys, today I'm gonna go over electronics on your kayak, because maybe you're out there trying to decide whether or not you should get, you know, that new Lowrance or that new Hummingbird or Garmin or whatever your preferred fish finder is for your kayak. I hope I can absolutely clear up all of that for you. Coming up. Man, it is hot out here today. It's like 95 degrees, probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Hoping to get on that late bite, but let's dig into these electronics, guys. That's why you clicked on this video, and thanks for, you know, joining me. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Talking about these electronics, so I haven't even powered my unit on yet, but one of the first, let's go ahead and power it on. You see, she's coming on. One of the very first things that I like to look for when I first power that unit on is going to be the temperature. And you know, there are things that you can do to carry around with you to figure out some temperatures, so that you're not, so that you don't have to have a depth finder if you don't want. For instance, like this right here, I've got a little aquarium thermometer. So right here, I've got a little aquarium thermometer. This is something that I like to use to check the temperature at depths, you know, 10, 15 feet or even more. Why do I want to do that? Because what you're getting off of the transducer is the surface temp, and that's not necessarily where the fish are at, so to speak. So that's not the optimal temperature for them. A lot of the smaller fish will be there, but you know, the bigger fish will be at the deeper depths. And so if you just kind of want to know what that deeper depth is, the temperature wise, then having a little thermometer with you is pretty good. Put that on a marker buoy and just drop it down in the water. But that's the first thing that I look at. So right now my temperature of the water is at 91 degrees. Let's just say that anything over 100, that's when the fish start to get very, very unhappy. So moving on, we're going to talk about a lot of things today on today's video with regard to electronics, and you know, why they're important and why you should have them on your kayak. Okay, so there are a lot of functions in electronics that will help you catch fish, and it's not all about, like, please do not think that it is solely about going out there using the 2D sonar, using the structure scan to, you know, find and see fish. I would say that, you know, at least for me, a lot of the time, it's not about finding fish, you know, finding actual bass, because I'm in a kayak. There's only so much water I can cover. But when you find structure and you find bait and you use your maps to identify areas that are potential for holding fish, then you can go over those areas with your structure scan and your 2D sonar and your down scan, and that's when you're going to be able to locate those fish, or where those fish are at in the areas that you've picked and targeted. And your maps is going to be one of the most important things there is, because you can dial in the sensitivity, sorry, not the sensitivity, but the depth. You can dial in the depth and be able to find, you know, those areas to where maybe deep water comes in close contact with the shore. Those are going to be high percentage areas to where you can catch fish. I've done that in lakes in Texas. I've done that in lakes in Maryland. At Kentucky Lake, it produces fish day in, day out. If you just find those deep spots that touch shorelines. Like for instance, say this shoreline right here, you know, maybe even on this point was 5 feet, but right near that point, right over there, perhaps it comes in and touches maybe 10 feet. That little bit of a pocket right there, because it's so close in this area, and because it's so close when you have, you know, hundreds of yards of shoreline to where that one pocket is the deepest part, and you found that on your maps, which you can use on your lowrance and go to, well then that's a place that could hold fish and could very well potentially hold fish. And right there, you've taken and used your electronics to cut down the water. There have been times when I've passed loads of shoreline just to get to a single spot, started making casts, started catching fish, and that was all from maps. So that's why maps are very important, because they let you cut out a lot of water. They let you find things, find tons of things, especially if you have a map chip. They let you mark things. So if you have things like big pieces of wood like we're coming up on right here that are normally underwater, you know, things like that, things like these stumps and stuff, then you know, you can mark those and come back to those, because you can't remember every single one of those. I'm sorry, you can't. Unless it's your like home lake, you fish there every day of your entire life, all right, maybe you can. But for the rest of us, with all the lakes and stuff that we fish, you know, it's nice to have those waypoints and those things marked, those grass lines, all that kind of stuff in our lowrance. It's our, you know, documentation, it's our record keeping. So that's what maps does for you, and that's why having a unit with maps is actually important. Now, I'm not trying to upsell you on a lowrance unit TI9 by any means. I'm simply trying to explain why having, you know, a unit on your kayak is actually very important. So let's get into the next part, which is going to be using your lowrance and the depth to identify areas to fish. So another thing that's really important about using your electronics is trying to identify the depth at which fish are holding, because again, it's not always about seeing a fish on the electronics and catching that fish. It's about learning the information that that fish in the electronics are telling you, because if a fish and all the fish that you're seeing are holding at 10 to 15 feet and you're not catching anything shallow, why are you fishing shallow? You should be fishing in 10 to 15 feet and trying to catch those fish. Yes, not all fish are active at certain times. Yeah, you know, again, you've identified where the fish are at and where they're holding. So that can take you out of that whole, you know, 5 to 10 feet range, and you can focus on that 10 to 15 foot range. And depending on what your target species is too, this varies. So that's one thing that I immediately start trying to ascertain when I start looking at my electronics as soon as I turn them on, is where are the fish holding, where are the bait holding, which is what we're going to talk about next too, because like I said, it's not always about finding the fish on your lowrance. It's great when you do, but it's not always about that. It's about using the maps. It's about using, you know, the 2D sonar to figure out where they're holding, and it's about locating bait pods, so that you know, because where the bait's at is where the fish at. They care about reproduction, they care about forage, which is bait, and they care about security.